I am Hattie, 59 years old, and until last week I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. Then my daughter Margaret called while I lay in my hospital bed, hooked to machines, monitoring my failing heart. "Mom, I'm getting married tomorrow. Your car and house are sold. Bye," she announced coldly. Despite the shock and pain crushing my chest, I managed to reply, "Okay, but you left out one thing." Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you what happened next in this story of family betrayal that changed everything. The colonial home with its white columns and wraparound porch had been my sanctuary for 32 years. My late husband Thomas and I bought it when Margaret was just 2 years old, planning to fill it with more children and decades of memories. Life had other plans. Thomas worked as an engineer while I built my career as a nurse at Mercy General Hospital. We never had more children after Margaret, but we poured all our love into raising her. When Thomas died unexpectedly from a stroke 6 years ago, the home became my only real asset. My nursing salary had been good, but raising Margaret in the lifestyle Thomas wanted for her had been expensive. Private school dance lessons, summer camps, and eventually an Ivy League education had consumed much of our savings. Thomas left me with the fully paid house, his modest life insurance, and my own retirement accounts from 35 years of nursing. Margaret took her father's death hard. She had always been a daddy's girl, and Thomas had indulged her every whim. At 28, she was still struggling to find her footing in life despite her expensive education. She had cycled through 3 different career paths already: marketing, interior design, and then a short-lived attempt at opening a boutique fitness studio. Thomas had financed each new start. After his death, Margaret seemed to expect that I would step seamlessly into Thomas's role as her financial safety net. At first, grief made me compliant. When she needed money to move apartments after a breakup, I gave it. When she wanted to take a healing trip to Bali after quitting her marketing job, I funded it. Each time I told myself it was what Thomas would have wanted. But as months passed, I noticed the pattern. Margaret only called when she needed money. Our conversations became transactional and cold. When I asked about her life or suggested visiting, she always had excuses. Too busy, bad timing, maybe next month. The truth was, Margaret and I had never been as close as she had been with Thomas. My long hours at the hospital meant Thomas had often been the primary parent at home. Night shifts, weekend rotations, and holiday coverage were the realities of my career in nursing. While I saved lives, I missed school plays and soccer games. Margaret never seemed to understand that my absences weren't choices. They were sacrifices for our family's stability. "Dad was always there for me," she would say, during arguments, the implication clear I had not been. By her teenage years, Margaret had developed a sense of entitlement that concerned me. She expected expensive gifts for every occasion. When Thomas and I tried to teach her budgeting before college, she rolled her eyes and said, "Why does it matter? You guys will always bail me out." Thomas found her attitude charming. "She's just confident about her future," he'd say. But I worried we were failing to prepare her for real life. College only reinforced these issues. While many students worked part-time, Margaret claimed that would interfere with her college experience. We sent monthly allowances that disappeared quickly, followed by emergency requests for more. When I suggested she get a summer job, Thomas overruled me. "She needs internships to build her resume." He insisted, continuing to fund her fully. After Thomas died, Margaret's financial demands only increased. 6 months ago, she called with her latest scheme: opening an upscale cocktail bar in the gentrifying part of town. She had no experience in the restaurant industry, no business plan, and no capital of her own. She needed just $80,000 to get started. For the first time, I refused. "Margaret, I don't think this is a wise investment," I told her. "I can help you find resources for writing a business plan, or maybe you could start by working in a bar to learn the industry." Her reaction was explosive. You never support me. Dad would have helped me. You're just being selfish with his money. It's not about the money, I tried to explain. I want you to succeed on your own terms, not just because someone handed you everything. She hung up on me. 3 weeks passed with no contact despite my attempts to reach out. Then my health took a sudden turn. The chest pains started during my morning walk. At first I dismissed them as indigestion or anxiety. But when my left arm began tingling and cold sweat broke out across my forehead, I recognized the signs. I called 911 from my cell phone and managed to unlock my front door before collapsing in the entryway. The diagnosis was severe coronary artery blockage. I needed bypass surgery, and soon. As they prepared me for pre-surgical tests, I tried repeatedly to reach Margaret. She needed to know, not just because I was scared, but because she was my only family, my emergency contact, my daughter. She finally answered on the 3rd day of my hospital stay. Her voice was distant, distracted. Hospital surgery when? She asked the basic questions without emotion. I tried not to let it hurt me. Margaret had always been uncomfortable with medical situations. Perhaps this was just her way of coping with fear. Can you come see me? I asked. The surgery is scheduled for next week, but I could use some company before then. She sighed audibly. I guess I can stop by tomorrow. Is there anything you need from the house? Relief flooded through me. Yes, actually, my reading glasses, some comfortable pajamas, and my tablet. The key is under the planter on the back porch. When Margaret arrived the next day, I was struck by how beautiful she looked and how detached. She dropped off the items I'd requested, glanced at the monitors surrounding me, and checked her phone constantly. Before leaving, she paused at the door. Mom, where do you keep your important papers? You know, insurance will, that kind of thing. With the surgery coming up, I should probably know where everything is. The question seemed reasonable enough. In my home office, second drawer of the filing cabinet, the house deed car title, everything is there. But don't worry, the doctors are very optimistic about the surgery. She nodded without meeting my eyes. Feel better? I'll check in later. She didn't kiss me goodbye. After she left, I felt a lingering unease, but attributed it to my medical situation. 3 more days passed in the sterile loneliness of my hospital room. Nurses came and went, doctors explained procedures, but no Margaret. Then came the call that would change everything. The hospital room had grown dark as evening settled in. The beeping of monitors provided an unwelcome soundtrack to my solitude. I had tried to distract myself with television, but nothing held my interest. My thoughts kept returning to the upcoming surgery and the strange distance I felt from my only child. The phone beside my bed rang, startling me from my thoughts. Margaret's name appeared on the caller ID, sending a wave of relief through me. Finally, she was checking in. Margaret, I'm so glad you called. I was getting worried, I said. Her voice came through cold and businesslike. Mom, I'm calling to tell you something important. I'm getting married tomorrow. The news hit me like a physical blow. Married to whom? I didn't even know you were dating anyone seriously. His name is Brent. We've been together for a few months. It's happening fast, but when you know, you know. There was something rehearsed about her words. But Margaret, why wouldn't you want me at your wedding? Can't you wait until after my surgery so I can be there? She continued as if I hadn't spoken. Also, I needed to let you know that your car and house have been sold. The new owners will be moving in next week. I've already cleared out anything valuable. My mouth went dry. The room seemed to tilt around me. What are you talking about? You can't sell my house or my car. Those aren't yours to sell. Actually, I can. As your power of attorney, I'm acting in your best interest. The house was too big for you anyway. Brent and I are moving to California tomorrow. We got a great opportunity there. Her voice had the same tone she used when telling me about a new pair of shoes. Casual, slightly excited, completely detached from the magnitude of what she was doing. My heart rate monitor began beeping more rapidly. A nurse glanced in through the door window, concerned. I waved her away, trying to process what I was hearing. Margaret, this doesn't make sense. You don't have power of attorney. And who is this Brent? I want to meet him before you make such a huge decision. It's already done, Mom. The paperwork is signed. Anyway, we need to go now. We have a lot of packing to do before our flight tomorrow. Bye. Her dismissive tone made it clear she was about to hang up. Shock, betrayal, and disbelief collided within me. Yet somehow, from some deep reserve of strength I didn't know I possessed, I maintained my composure. Okay, but you left out one thing, I said quietly. Her voice returned suddenly cautious. What do you mean? A strange laugh escaped me, not of humor, but of realization. You left out the fact that I changed the power of attorney years ago. You can't sell what isn't legally yours to sell. Silence hummed across the line. For the first time in our conversation, Margaret seemed at a loss for words. The monitor beside me continued its frantic beeping as a strange calm settled over me. The worst had happened. My only child had attempted to steal everything from me as I lay in a hospital bed. Yet somehow, I had been prepared for it. The nurse returned this time, entering the room with concern etched on her face. Mrs. Winters, your heart rate is elevated. I need to check your vitals. Margaret, I need to go, I said into the phone. We'll discuss this with the lawyers. I hung up before she could respond. As the nurse checked my blood pressure and adjusted my medication, I closed my eyes, remembering the conversation that had saved me from complete ruin. A conversation with my late husband Thomas, just days before his stroke. Thomas had always been the optimist in our marriage. While I worried about college funds and retirement accounts, he focused on experiences and making memories. But in his final weeks, something changed. He became unusually pensive, particularly about Margaret. Hattie, I need to talk to you about our daughter, he said one evening as we sat on our porch swing. I think we've made some mistakes with her. The statement shocked me. Thomas had always defended Margaret's every action, dismissed her entitlement as youthful confidence. For him to express concern was unprecedented. What do you mean? I asked cautiously. He sighed, looking older than his 62 years. I've been watching how she handles money, how she expects us to solve every problem. It's not healthy, and it's not what I want for her. More importantly, I'm worried about you and about me. Why? If something happens to me, Margaret will expect you to continue funding her lifestyle, and I'm afraid she might try to access more than just what you offer willingly. He squeezed my hand. Promise me you'll protect yourself, even from our daughter, if necessary. I had promised more to ease his mind than because I truly believed Margaret would ever take advantage of me. But after his death, when I saw how quickly she began treating me like a bank rather than a mother, I remembered his warning. 6 years ago, just 2 months after Thomas's funeral, I visited Rachel Goldman, our family lawyer. She helped me update my will and, more importantly, establish clear documentation regarding power of attorney. Many people assume their children automatically get power of attorney if they become incapacitated, Rachel explained. That's not true unless you've legally designated them. And in your case, based on what you've told me, I wouldn't recommend Margaret for that role. Instead, I gave my best friend Josephine Wright power of attorney. Josephine had been my friend since nursing school, 37 years, of shared confidences and unwavering support. She was responsible, compassionate, and most importantly, had no financial interest in my decisions. Margaret received a very limited secondary power that would only activate if I were declared mentally incompetent by 2 independent physicians, and even then, she would need to consult with Josephine on any major decisions. I never told Margaret about these arrangements. Part of me hoped she would mature, that our relationship would heal to the point where such precautions would seem unnecessary. Another part felt guilty for not trusting my own daughter, but Thomas's warning and my own observations convinced me it was necessary. Now, lying in my hospital bed after Margaret's devastating call, I reached for my cell phone with shaking hands. I needed to call Josephine. She answered on the second ring. "Hattie, is everything okay? How are you feeling?" The concern in her voice brought tears to my eyes. "Joe, I need your help. Something terrible is happening." My voice broke as I explained Margaret's call, the claims about selling my house and car, the sudden marriage, the planned move to California. That little... Josephine rarely cursed, but she made an exception now. "Don't worry, Hattie. She has no legal right to sell anything. I'll call Rachel right now, and then I'll come to the hospital. We'll fix this." What if she forged documents? She had access to all my papers when I asked her to bring things from the house. Then she's committed fraud, and we'll handle that too. Try to stay calm for your heart's sake. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Josephine's decisive tone steadied me. Unlike my daughter here was someone I could truly rely on. After hanging up, I lay back against my pillows, allowing the full weight of Margaret's betrayal to wash over me. My only child had tried to steal everything I owned while I was vulnerable and ill. She had planned to leave me homeless without transportation, and presumably without access to my own money, all while fleeing to another state with a man I'd never even met. What kind of mother raises a child capable of such cruelty? The question echoed painfully through my mind as I waited for Josephine, my heart heavy with a different kind of pain than the one that had brought me to the hospital. When Josephine arrived at my hospital room, her normally calm face was flushed with anger. She hugged me carefully, mindful of the IV in my arm, then pulled a chair close to my bed. "I've already spoken with Rachel," she said. "She's contacted the county recorder's office, the DMV, and your bank to put freezes on everything. If Margaret has tried to file paperwork, we'll know by morning." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you, Joe. I can't believe this is happening." "Neither can I. The Margaret I watched grow up was spoiled, yes, but this..." She shook her head. "There must be something else going on. Who is this Brent person she's suddenly marrying?" I shrugged helplessly. "I have no idea. She's never mentioned him before today." Josephine squeezed my hand. "Get some rest. I'll stay here tonight, and tomorrow Rachel will come with updates. We'll figure this out." But sleep eluded me. Each time I closed my eyes, I heard Margaret's cold voice announcing she had sold my home, the home where I had raised her, the home filled with memories of Thomas. By morning, my eyes were gritty, my heart monitor had alarmed so many times, the nurses had almost called my doctor, and Josephine looked nearly as exhausted as I felt. Rachel arrived at 8, her expression grave. She carried a leather portfolio and wore the serious expression I recognized from Thomas's will reading. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Someone filed paperwork transferring your house deed 3 days ago. The signature matches yours closely enough that it wasn't flagged. The car title was transferred 2 days ago." My stomach dropped. "Margaret forged my signature." Rachel nodded grimly. "It appears so. I've already spoken to the police. This is clear fraud, Hattie, and it gets worse." She opened her portfolio. The house was sold for $400,000. "400,000, Josephine exclaimed. "That house is worth at least $700,000 in this market." "Exactly," Rachel confirmed. "It was a cash sale to a property investment company. They likely knew it was undervalued but didn't ask questions. The same company bought the car for well below market value. And the money," I asked, dreading the answer, "deposited into a new account opened in your name with Margaret listed as having signature authority. Most of it was transferred out yesterday to another account we can't access information on without a court order." The room seemed to spin around me. "She planned this so carefully," I whispered. "While I was lying here worrying about my heart, she was systematically stealing everything I own." Josephine stood up, pacing the small room. "What about this Brent character?" Do we know anything about him? Rachel's expression darkened further. I had my assistant do some quick research. Brent Donovan has been involved in 3 separate fraud investigations in the past 5 years. No convictions, but the pattern is clear. He targets vulnerable people with assets. And now he's targeted my daughter to get to me, I said, the pieces falling into place. Or maybe they're working together. I don't know which is worse. Either way, we need to act quickly, Rachel said. I've already filed emergency petitions with the court. We need to get statements from your doctors confirming you're mentally competent and were hospitalized when these transactions occurred. And Hattie, she hesitated. I've advised the police to pursue criminal charges. This is serious fraud. Criminal charges against my own daughter. The thought made me physically ill. Do we have to? I asked weakly. Josephine sat beside me again, her face gentle but firm. Hattie, think about what she's done, what she was planning to do, leave you with nothing while she starts a new life with your money. This isn't a misunderstanding or a young person's mistake. This is calculated, cruel betrayal. Deep down, I knew Josephine was right. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made for Margaret over the years, working double shifts when she needed braces, giving up a promotion opportunity that would have required relocation because she didn't want to change schools, missing my own mother's 60th birthday celebration because Margaret had a dance recital the same weekend. Through it all, I had told myself that motherhood was about sacrifice, that one day Margaret would understand and appreciate what I had done. Instead, she had waited until I was at my most vulnerable and tried to take everything. Go ahead with the charges, I said, my voice stronger than I expected, and find out where she is. I want to look her in the eye when she's caught. The next 24 hours have passed in a blur of legal documents, police statements, and medical tests. My surgery was postponed due to the stress my cardiologist concerned about operating, while my emotional state was so fragile. Instead, they adjusted my medications and monitored me closely while the investigation unfolded. Josephine barely left my side, fielding calls from Rachel and the detective assigned to my case. We learned that Margaret had emptied my checking account, but hadn't been able to access my retirement funds, which required in-person verification I couldn't provide from my hospital bed. We got lucky, Josephine said. If your surgery had happened before you discovered what she was doing, she might have tried to access those funds while you were unconscious. The thought sent chills through me. Had Margaret been waiting for me to be at my most helpless before taking everything? Had she wished for complications during my surgery that would leave me unable to fight back? These dark thoughts were swirling through my mind when the detective called with news. We've located your daughter and the man she claims is her fiancé, he reported. They were attempting to board a flight to Los Angeles. We've detained them for questioning. I want to see her, I insisted despite Josephine's concerned protests. I need to understand why she would do this. The detective hesitated. Given your medical condition, I'm not sure that's advisable. The confrontation could be stressful. I'm already stressed, I pointed out. Not knowing her reasons is worse than anything she could say to my face. After consulting with my doctor, a compromise was reached. Margaret and Brent would be brought to the hospital under police escort. The meeting would be brief and monitored by medical staff. As I waited for their arrival, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed decades older than she had a week ago. My gray hair hung limp around my pale face. Dark circles shadowed my eyes. I was the image of a woman betrayed, and for a moment I hated Margaret for reducing me to this. But as I heard the door to my room open, I straightened my shoulders and lifted my chin. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the dignity Thomas would have expected of me. I was still Hattie Winters, and no one, not even my own child, would take that from me. The hospital room felt too small for the tension it now contained. Margaret entered first, her hands awkwardly constrained by police-issued flex cuffs. Behind her came a man I assumed was Brent, tall, conventionally handsome, with the practiced smile of a salesman. 2 officers followed, positioning themselves by the door. Josephine stood protectively at my bedside. Margaret looked nothing like the daughter I remembered. Her normally perfect appearance was disheveled, her mascara smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes. Yet when she spoke, her voice held no remorse, only indignation. "This is completely unnecessary," she said, lifting her bound wrists. "I was acting as your power of attorney. Everything I did was legal." I studied her face, searching for any sign of the child I had raised. "We both know that's not true, Margaret. You never had power of attorney. You're confused because of your heart condition," she insisted, looking to the officers as if for confirmation. "My mother hasn't been well for some time. That's why I needed to manage her affairs." Brent nodded eagerly beside her. "We were only trying to help, moving her assets to a more liquid form so we could pay for her care." His voice was smooth rehearsed. I disliked him instantly. "Is that why you were leaving the country with all her money?" Josephine asked sharply. "To pay for her care from California?" Brent's smile faltered. Margaret shot him a warning glance before turning back to me. "Mom, you were never there for me when I needed you. Always working, always choosing your patients over your own daughter. Dad understood me. He would have wanted me to have the house anyway." The unfairness of her accusation stung like a physical blow. "I worked to support us," I said quietly, "to give you opportunities I never had. Your father and I both sacrificed to give you the best life possible." "Well, now it's time for you to sacrifice a little more," Margaret retorted, her voice hardening. "You're old, you've had your life. That house is wasted on you. At least this way, the money would go to someone who can actually enjoy it." Each word was like a knife to my heart, yet somehow they clarified everything. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or the influence of a manipulative boyfriend. This was who Margaret had become, or perhaps who she had always been beneath the surface. "You're right that I sacrificed for you," I said, finding strength in the painful truth. "I worked night shifts so you could have dance lessons. I gave up a promotion that would have advanced my career because you didn't want to change schools. I put your college tuition ahead of my own retirement planning." I took a shaky breath, feeling decades of suppressed emotions rising to the surface. "But you're wrong that I wasn't there. I was there in every brown bag lunch I packed at 5 a.m. before my shift. I was there in every recital I rushed to after working 12 hours straight. I was there in every opportunity I made possible for you through my work." Margaret rolled her eyes, but I continued, my voice growing stronger. "You know what wasn't there, Margaret? Gratitude. Appreciation for what you had instead of resentment for what you didn't. Understanding that love isn't measured in hours spent physically present, but in sacrifices made willingly." Brent shifted uncomfortably subtly, distancing himself from Margaret. "Look, there's clearly been a misunderstanding here." Margaret assured me she had legal authority. "Save it for your lawyer," Josephine interrupted coldly. "You're both going to need good ones." Margaret's facade finally cracked. "You wouldn't press charges against your own daughter. You're bluffing." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a strange calm settle over me. "I taught you many things, Margaret, but apparently I failed to teach you about consequences. That stops today. Yes, I am pressing charges. Yes, I will testify against you. What you did wasn't just illegal. It was cruel beyond anything I could have imagined from my own child." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Margaret's face. "But where will I go? What will I do? You can't just abandon me to the system." "Like you were planning to abandon me," I asked quietly. "Homeless and penniless after my surgery. The difference is you chose this path. I never chose to be betrayed." Brent was now actively trying to create distance from Margaret. "Officers, I'd like to cooperate fully. I had no idea she didn't have legal authority. She showed me documents." "Shut up, Brent," Margaret hissed. The officers stepped forward. "That's enough. We're taking you both in for formal questioning now." As they moved to escort Margaret and Brent out, Margaret turned back to me, her expression finally showing a glimmer of fear. "Mom, please, don't do this. We can work something out." Looking at her, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sadness for what our relationship had become and what it would never be. "Goodbye, Margaret. I hope someday you understand what you've thrown away. It's worth far more than any house or car." As the door closed behind them, the strength that had sustained me through the confrontation evaporated. I collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down my face. Josephine sat beside me, holding my hand in silence. No words could soothe this particular pain. The agony of a mother whose child had not just rejected her love, but had tried to destroy her life. After several minutes, my doctor entered, concern evident on his face. "Your heart rate is elevated, Mrs. Winters. I'm going to give you something to help you rest." As the medication entered my system and consciousness began to slip away, I found myself wondering how many hearts had been broken in this room, and whether any medical intervention could heal the kind of wound my daughter had inflicted on mine. The next morning I awoke to sunshine streaming through my hospital window and the news that my surgery would proceed as scheduled. "Your vitals have stabilized," Dr. Patterson explained, "and frankly, getting this procedure done will give you one less thing to worry about while you deal with everything else." Everything else. Such a simple phrase for the complete upheaval of my life. In the past 48 hours, I had discovered my daughter's betrayal confronted her and set in motion legal proceedings that would likely send her to prison. Now, I faced open-heart surgery with no family by my bedside. Only Josephine, whose friendship had become my lifeline. "I'll be here when you wake up," Josephine promised as the nurses prepared me for surgery. "And we'll face whatever comes next, together." The surgery lasted 4 hours. The surgeon later told me it had been textbook perfect. 3 bypasses to restore blood flow to my struggling heart. The physical recovery began immediately with nurses helping me sit up and take a few steps the very next day, but the emotional recovery would prove far more complex. While I navigated breathing exercises and cardiac rehabilitation, Josephine and Rachel managed the legal aftermath of Margaret's fraud. The process was painfully public. Local newspapers ran the story of a daughter who had tried to steal her hospitalized mother's home and life savings. Old colleagues from the hospital called or sent cards, their messages mixing get-well wishes with expressions of shock and sympathy. "The house sale has been frozen by court order," Rachel reported during one of her hospital visits. "The buyers are understandably upset, but they're also potential victims in this. We're working on a solution that doesn't penalize them for purchasing in good faith." My car had already been resold by the property company, disappearing into the used car market. "We can trace it, but it might be easier to accept the loss and use the insurance," Rachel advised. "The criminal case will help with the claim." Margaret and Brent were both charged with multiple felonies: fraud, forgery, theft. Brent quickly turned on Margaret, offering testimony against her in exchange for reduced charges. His statement revealed that they had been planning the scheme for months, ever since Margaret had learned about my heart condition during a routine phone call. "She said it was perfect timing," he reported to investigators. "That you'd be vulnerable and distracted, and that with your medical issues, no one would question her acting on your behalf." The betrayal had roots far deeper than I had imagined. While I processed this painful knowledge, I also learned more about Brent's history. He had a pattern of befriending or romancing people with assets, convincing them to make poor financial decisions that benefited him, then disappearing when things inevitably fell apart. Margaret wasn't his mastermind partner. She was his latest victim, albeit one who had willingly participated in victimizing someone else. After 2 weeks in the hospital and cardiac rehab center, I was cleared to return home. Josephine drove me, warning me gently that the house might feel different now. Margaret was in there going through your things, she reminded me. The police have been through it too, and knowing what she planned to do. She was right. As I walked through my front door, the house I had loved for 3 decades felt violated. Margaret's fingerprints were invisible but omnipresent. Had she stood in my kitchen calculating its value as she sipped coffee from my cups? Had she sat in Thomas's favorite chair, planning how to steal the home he had worked so hard to provide for us? Had she looked at our family photos while forging documents to strip me of everything? That first night home, I couldn't sleep in my bedroom. The thought of Margaret going through my closet, my personal items, made the space feel contaminated. Instead, I made up the guest room and lay awake listening to the familiar creaks and settlings of the house that had almost been stolen from me. During those dark hours, I finally allowed myself to fully grieve, not just for the immediate betrayal, but for the daughter I had apparently never really known. Had there been signs I missed? Moments when I could have changed her path? Or was this inevitable from the time Thomas and I first gave in to her childhood demands, teaching her that her desires outweighed others' needs? Morning brought no answers, but did bring resolve. This house, this life, was still mine. I would not allow Margaret's actions to poison it forever. I began seeing a therapist specializing in family trauma. Dr. Linda Cohen's gentle guidance helped me navigate the complex emotions of being betrayed by my only child. What you're experiencing is similar to grief, she explained during one session. You're mourning the daughter you thought you had, the relationship you hoped for, and the future you had imagined. That loss is real, even though Margaret is still alive. Through these sessions, I confronted painful truths about my parenting, my marriage, and the dynamics that had led to this point. I realized that Thomas and I had often been at odds in how we raised Margaret, creating inconsistency that allowed her to manipulate and divide us. My work schedule had created absences that I tried to compensate for with material indulgences rather than boundaries and life lessons. You can acknowledge these patterns without taking responsibility for Margaret's choices. Dr. Cohen reminded me, understanding is not the same as excusing. As my physical strength returned, I found unexpected support beyond Josephine and my medical team. Fellow cardiac patients from my rehabilitation group became friends. We shared not just exercise routines and dietary tips, but our life stories and challenges. James, a retired high school principal, had experienced financial elder abuse from his nephew. Marisa, a former restaurant owner, was rebuilding her life after her business partner, her own brother, had embezzled their company funds. Their stories helped me feel less alone, less uniquely betrayed. Family can hurt you like no one else, Marissa observed during one of our post-rehab coffee meetings. But family isn't just blood. It's also who you choose to let into your heart. Those words stayed with me as I gradually built a new support system. My neighbors, the Johnsons, began inviting me for Sunday dinners. Former nursing colleagues organized a garden renovation project for my backyard, creating a peaceful retreat where I could sit during my recovery. Even my mail carrier, noticing I was home alone recovering, would stop for brief chats that brightened my days. 3 months after surgery, I attended Margaret's sentencing hearing. She had accepted a plea deal, 4 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 2+ restitution requirements. She looked small in her jail uniform, her expression a mixture of defiance and fear. When given the opportunity to speak, she offered a carefully worded apology that sounded crafted by her lawyer, devoid of true remorse. She never once looked directly at me. I had prepared a victim impact statement but found myself revising it mentally as I approached the podium. The words I had rehearsed suddenly seemed inadequate for the moment. Margaret is my only child. I began, my voice steadier than I expected. For 34 years, I have loved her unconditionally. That hasn't changed even now. What has changed is my understanding of what that love should look like. I took a deep breath, looking directly at my daughter for perhaps the first time in years, really seeing her not the image of her I had clung to. Love shouldn't enable harm to others or to oneself. For too long I enabled Margaret's worst instincts by shielding her from consequences. That ends today. I support this sentence not out of vengeance, but because I believe that finally facing the results of her actions is the only way Margaret might someday become the person she could be. I turned to the judge. I ask only that her sentence include mandatory therapy and financial management education. The restitution matters less to me than the possibility, however small, of rehabilitation. As I returned to my seat, Margaret finally met my eyes. What passed between us wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. We were far from that point. But perhaps it was recognition and acknowledgement of the truth we now shared. After the hearing, Rachel approached me. "Are you sure about the restitution? You have every right to full compensation." I nodded. "I'm sure. My retirement funds remain untouched. The house is still mine. I have enough. Taking more from her won't heal anything." "You're a better person than most would be in your position," Rachel observed. "Not better," I corrected. "Just clear about what matters now, and it isn't money." 1 year after my surgery, my life had found a new rhythm. My health had improved beyond my doctor's expectations, partly due to my commitment to the lifestyle changes they had recommended. Daily walks, a heart-healthy diet, and stress management techniques had become my new normal. The house that had almost been stolen from me had undergone a transformation. I had used some of my retirement funds to renovate, changing the spaces that felt most tainted by Margaret's betrayal. The formal dining room where we had celebrated so many family occasions became a bright art studio where I explored painting for the first time since college. Thomas's office, which I had preserved like a shrine after his death, was converted into a comfortable guest room for visiting friends. "It's like you're reclaiming your space," Josephine observed as she helped me hang new curtains in the living room. "Making it truly yours, maybe, for the first time." She was right. For decades, this house had been first Thomas's vision, then a family home focused on Margaret, then a repository of memories I had been afraid to disturb. Now, it reflected who I was in this new chapter, a woman who had survived both heart failure and heartbreak, emerging stronger from both. My social circle had expanded in ways I never would have predicted. The cardiac rehabilitation group had evolved into a weekly dinner club that rotated between our homes. I had joined a community garden project where I met people of all ages who shared my newfound interest in growing things. Most surprisingly, I had started volunteering twice a week at Mercy General, my old workplace, providing companionship to cardiac patients who faced long hospital stays. "You have a gift for this," Nurse Williams told me after observing me with patients. "You understand their fears in a way most volunteers can't." "I understand loneliness," I replied simply, "and how much difference a friendly face can make." The legal aftermath of Margaret's actions had largely resolved. The house sale had been nullified, with the would-be buyers receiving compensation through the courts. My car had been replaced with insurance funds. Margaret remained in prison, eligible for parole in another year. I visited her monthly, our conversations evolving from strained and defensive to cautiously honest. She participated in therapy and educational programs, though whether from genuine desire to change or simply to improve her parole chances, I couldn't be sure. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad," she said during one visit, "about how different he and I saw things. He thought he was helping me by giving me everything I wanted. I thought I deserved it all, without earning it." It was the closest she had come to insight about the patterns that had led to her crimes. I nodded encouraging, but not overly eager. We had a long way to go before trust could be rebuilt, if ever. The parole board will want to know your plans, I said. Where you'll live, how you'll support yourself. Margaret looked down at her hands. I know I can't come home. I wouldn't ask that of you. My cellmate's sister runs a halfway house for women. She said she might have space. That sounds like a good start, I replied. And when you're ready, I've set up something that might help. I explained that I had established a small educational fund in her name, not accessible directly to her, but available to pay for vocational training or college courses. It's not a free ride. You'll need to maintain certain standards, but the opportunity will be there when you're ready to earn it. She studied my face, perhaps looking for the mother who had once given in to her every demand. That woman was gone, replaced by someone wiser with boundaries firmly in place. Thank you, she said finally. I don't deserve your help. This isn't about deserving, I told her. It's about believing change is possible even after the worst mistakes. I learned that from my patients over the years. Now I'm choosing to believe it about my daughter, too. As spring blossomed into summer, I made a decision that surprised even Josephine. Using a portion of the life insurance money from Thomas that I had kept untouched, I established a small scholarship at the local community college for nursing students from single-parent homes. The Hattie Winters Resilience Scholarship read the certificate presented at the college's donor reception, supporting those who care for others while overcoming personal challenges. The first recipient was a young single mother named Daria who worked night shifts at a nursing home while studying to become a registered nurse. When we met at the reception, she hugged me impulsively. "This means everything," she said, her eyes bright with tears. "My daughter is 7. She doesn't always understand why I have to work and study instead of being with her. Sometimes I worry what that's teaching her." I thought of my own choices, the balance I had tried and sometimes failed to strike between providing for Margaret and being present for her. Tell her you're teaching her that dreams take work, that caring for others is valuable, and that her mother is strong enough to do hard things, I advised, and then make sure she knows she's loved even in your absence. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the strange path my life had taken. A year ago, I had been betrayed by the person I thought would always be my closest family. I had nearly lost my home, my health, and my sense of purpose. Yet somehow through that painful crucible, I had found a richer life than I had known before. My heart repaired by skilled surgeons and strengthened by exercise and proper care, now beat steadily in a chest that also contained a deeper understanding of both love and boundaries. The wisdom had come at a tremendous cost, but it was no less valuable for that. At home, I found an email from Margaret's prison counselor updating me on her progress. She was completing a financial literacy course and had started writing in a journal daily, small steps on a long journey. I sent a brief, encouraging reply, maintaining the careful balance between support and enablement that I was still learning to navigate. Later that evening, as twilight settled over my garden, I sat on my newly built patio surrounded by friends. Josephine was there along with James and Marissa from cardiac rehab, my neighbors the Johnsons, and several other people who had become important parts of my new life. We were planning a community garden project on a vacant lot near the hospital, something that would give cardiac patients and their families a peaceful place to visit during long treatments. Everyone had ideas to contribute skills to offer. As I looked around at these faces, some I had known for decades, others for just months, I realized that family could indeed be chosen, could be built from the bonds of shared experience, mutual respect, and genuine care. My heart attack and Margaret's betrayal had stripped away what I thought was the foundation of my life, only to reveal a stronger one, waiting to be constructed. "Hattie, what do you think?" James asked, gesturing to the garden plans spread across the table. Should we include a children's section? I smiled, imagining young patients and their siblings finding moments of joy among flowers and vegetables. Absolutely. Every garden needs new growth to thrive. The conversation continued around me as the stars appeared overhead. My renovated house stood solid behind us, no longer a space defined by loss and betrayal, but a home filled with new purpose and possibility. Have you ever faced a betrayal that forced you to rebuild your life? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below, and remember to like, subscribe, and share this video if my journey resonated with you. Sometimes, our deepest wounds become the foundations for our greatest growth. Thank you for listening, and I wish you hearts that are strong in every sense of the word.